There is a single page in the Caldermoor Institute of Acoustic Sciences, filed under reference K-0047, that records the official ratification of a new tonal standard for the Meridian provinces. The page is dated the 14th day of the 7th Assembly, Concordat year 88. It carries 3 signatures. The meeting at which it was ratified lasted, according to the Institute's session minutes, 11 minutes. 11 minutes to change the frequency to which every instrument in the Meridian provinces would be tuned for the rest of recorded history. The minutes contain no record of debate. I found this page while looking for something unrelated. I was tracing the history of the Caldermoor Institute's early correspondence, trying to understand why a significant portion of its founding archive from Concordat years 60 through 85 had been transferred to off-site storage rather than retained in the main reading room with the rest of its holdings. That transfer had always been noted in the catalog as routine space management, aging paper, standard archival practice. What I found when I looked at the transfer dates more carefully was that the materials moved off-site were not the oldest documents in the collection. They were specific ones, and one of the things they surrounded, the thing filed immediately after the gap they created, was K-0047. The Caldermoor Institute was established in Concordat year 61 under the authority of the Assembly of Provincial Arts, charged with the standardization of musical practice across the Meridian provinces. Before Concordat year 61, each province maintained its own tonal conventions. Instruments were tuned by local tradition, by the preference of individual guilds, by the acoustic properties of the halls in which they were played. There was no single frequency to which a string or a pipe was expected to correspond. There were dozens, varying by region, by instrument family, by decade. The Institute's founding mandate described this variation as a problem. The language of the mandate, preserved in the Institute's founding charter, called the existing situation, a disorder of reference that prevents musical works from traveling unchanged between provinces. The solution was a single agreed standard, a number, a frequency to which all instruments in all provinces would henceforth be tuned. The Institute spent 27 years deliberating. Then, in 11 minutes, they decided. But here is the detail that first gave me pause. The standard ratified in K-0047 was not the standard the Institute had been developing for 27 years. The internal working documents from the Institute's deliberation period, the ones that survive, which are not all of them, show a clear trajectory of recommendation toward a specific frequency that the Institute's acoustic researchers had identified as producing the most stable resonance in the instruments and halls most commonly used across the provinces. The research is documented. The reasoning is explained. The recommendation appears in at least 4 separate internal reports spanning Concordat years, 71 through 86. The frequency ratified in Ka-0047 is different, not dramatically different, not a difference that would be immediately perceptible to an untrained ear, a difference of a precise number of cycles described in the ratification document only as an upward adjustment for purposes of provincial alignment. Provincial alignment with what is not specified. The document does not name another standard it is aligning with. It does not cite an external authority. It simply states that the adjustment was made and that the new frequency would take effect at the start of the following assembly year. The 4 internal reports recommending the previous frequency are not referenced in Ka-0047. They are not mentioned. They are not overruled with explanation. They simply do not appear. And this is where the pattern becomes harder to set aside. The 3 signatories of Ka-0047 are identified by name and title in the ratification document. I searched the Institute's personnel records for all 3. The first 2 are well documented. Their careers at the Institute span decades. Their correspondence appears throughout the archive. Their names recur in committee minutes and research reports across multiple Concordat years. The 3rd signatory, listed as Provincial Delegate, Assembly of Arts, Outer Reaches, appears in no other document in the Institute's publicly accessible archive. Not in the personnel records, not in the correspondence logs, not in the session minutes for any meeting other than the one that produced KA-00471 meeting. One signature. One name that exists nowhere else in the institution that it signed on behalf of. I searched the Assembly of Provincial Arts' own records for the Outer Reaches delegation during the period surrounding Concordat year 88. The Assembly's records for that period are held in the Meridian Capital Registry. I submitted a research request. The response, received several weeks later, noted that delegation records for the Outer Reaches prior to Concordat year 95 were incomplete due to administrative reorganization during the consolidation period, and that no specific record of a delegate matching the name in K-0047 could be confirmed, could not be confirmed, not denied, not found, could not be confirmed. Now here is where the testimony introduces a complication that I have not been able to resolve. The Caldermoor Institute maintained a collection of oral recollections from retired instrument makers and performing musicians gathered over several decades by its archive staff as part of a broader effort to document the practical history of musical life in the Meridian provinces. The collection is catalogued and partially transcribed. Most of it describes the ordinary texture of professional musical life, training, patronage, hall acoustics, instrument construction techniques. In the transcription volume covering interviews conducted in the decade following Concordat year 90, I found an account given by a retired instrument maker named Oswin Toole, who had spent his career building and calibrating string instruments in the central provinces. Toole was interviewed in his later years, approximately 2 years after the frequency standard had been in effect for a full generation. His account covers his training, his workshop, his clients. Toward the end of the interview, the archivist asks whether he has any observations about the standard ratified in Sci 88. Toole's response, as transcribed, is as follows. I knew what they had been working toward. Everyone in the trade knew. We had been preparing for it for years. When the ratification came, it was not what we had prepared for. I recalibrated everything. I did not ask why, because I assumed there was a reason I had not been told. I was not told a reason. I assumed it anyway. That is what you do. I did not ask why, because I assumed there was a reason I had not been told. Toole is not alone in this. I found 3 additional transcripts in the same volume describing variations of the same experience. Instrument makers and musicians who had oriented their practice toward one expected frequency and then recalibrated without explanation when a different one arrived. None of them describe objecting. None of them describe receiving an explanation. The adjustment was made. The work continued. The previous preparation was set aside. What I cannot find is any record of the explanation being offered to anyone. Not to the instrument makers, not to the provincial music guilds, not as far as the archive shows, even to the Institute's own research staff, whose 27 years of work toward a different number was superseded by an 11-minute meeting. The Institute's internal correspondence from the months following KA-0047's ratification does not contain a single document explaining the change to staff. There is one memo, dated 3 weeks after the ratification, instructing all departments to update their reference materials to reflect the new standard. The memo does not acknowledge that a change has occurred. It is written as if the new frequency had always been the standard, and the update was purely administrative. As if the previous 27 years had not produced a different recommendation. And here is perhaps what I return to most. In Concordat year 91, 3 years after the ratification, a junior researcher at the Institute named Brix Aldevar submitted an internal inquiry to the Institute's directorate. The inquiry, preserved in the archive, asks a straightforward question. What was the documented rationale for the upward adjustment recorded in K-0047, and where could the supporting research be found? The inquiry is 1 page. It is politely worded. It cites the 4 previous internal reports and notes that they do not align with the ratified standard. And it asks simply where the reconciliation between the research and the decision had been documented. The Directorate's response, dated 6 weeks later, is 2 sentences. The first sentence acknowledges receipt of the inquiry. The second reads, "The rationale for the standard adopted in KA-0047 is contained in materials held in restricted administrative correspondence, access to which requires Directorate approval on a case-by-case basis." Restricted administrative correspondence, a category of the archive I had not previously encountered in the Institute's catalog. I searched the catalog for any reference to this category. I found one entry, a note in the general finding aid stating that certain administrative correspondence files from Concordat years 85 through 92 were held separately from the main collection pending review for transfer to standard access. The note is undated. The review it references has, as far as the catalog indicates, not concluded. Brix Aldivar's inquiry received a 2-sentence response and was filed. His name does not appear in any subsequent Institute document. Whether he continued working there, resigned, or was reassigned is not recorded in any personnel file I was able to locate. The frequency ratified in K-0047 has been in effect since Concordat year 88. Every instrument built in the Meridian provinces since then has been calibrated to it. Every hall constructed to acoustic specification has been designed around it. Every musician trained in the provinces has learned to hear it as correct, as natural, as the way sound is supposed to be organized. The 4 internal reports recommending a different number are in the archive. They are accessible. They have been accessible since they were written. Oswin Tull recalibrated his instruments and did not ask why. Brix Aldivar asked why and received 2 sentences. The third signatory of KA-0047 cannot be confirmed to have existed. The session lasted 11 minutes. The Caldermoor Institute is open to researchers on weekdays. The main reading room holds the bulk of the collection. KK-0047 is filed in the ratification series, 4th cabinet from the entrance. 2nd drawer, the restricted administrative correspondence from Concordat years 85 through 92, is noted in the finding aid as pending review. It has been pending for longer than Oswin Tull's entire career. The frequency is still in use, the 11 minutes are still in the minutes. And the 4 reports recommending something different are still in the archive, waiting for someone to explain why they were not enough.